Is back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes!
The center back, Jacob Glesnes,
He's going for it.
Yes! Oh my goal! What a goal!
And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. It's the first time for everything as the Philadelphia Union and LAFC. One of those two teams are going to lift the MLS Cup. Neither team has ever been in the MLS Cup final. Unfortunately for Union fans, the Union do not get to host at Subaru Park. And I know a whole bunch of Union fans have already started to travel out to LA. And hopefully while we're live here on Twitter, some of those people that are traveling out to LA can just come on and talk about their experiences. Have they traveled before? Is this their first time to LA? What their expectations are for the Union as they take on LAFC in the 2022 MLS Cup final. And as always, always joined every time we go live on Twitter Spaces by Kyle Almany. Kyle, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good, Todd. How are you?
I'm doing good, and we were talking before we officially started recording the podcast on my end. Hopefully my mic doesn't cut out. Your mic sounds good, so let's hope that continues.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be a fun show tonight, so let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So last episode, if you guys listened to me, I did not talk about the MLS Team of the Season because Team of the Season was not out. And so I think that's a perfect spot to start tonight's show before we talk about LAFC, Philadelphia Union. And if you guys listened to me, I don't know, a month ago when I had Skylar Hoffner on the podcast, we went over our MLS awards, who we expected to win, who we would vote for. And in my list, I had Andre Blake in goal, Alexander Collins, Jacob Glesnes, Kai Wagner. In the midfield, I had Hani Mukhtar, Ilie Sanchez, Luciano Acosta, and Daniel Gazdag. And my front three was Driussi, Ferreira, and Brenner. And then MLS comes out the other day and announces the official Team of the Season with Andre Blake in goal, Walker Zimmerman, Glesnes, and Kai Wagner as the 3 center backs, Hani Mukhtar, Daniel Gazdag, Acosta, and Driussi as the 4 midfielders. And then your 3 forwards, you had Carlos Vela of LAFC, you had Brandon Vasquez from FC Cincinnati, and Ferreira from FC Dallas. And so looking at that list, I had quite a few players that ended up in the actual Team of the Season. And there was 4 Union players nominated with Blake, Glesnes, Wagner, and Daniel Gazdag. And that caused a lot of controversy on Union Twitter. And I saw other MLS fans chime in too and say, how in the world did Walker Zimmerman get into Team of the Season when you had players like Jack Elliott, when you had players like Alexander Collins, who both had better seasons than Walker Zimmerman? And I think it's funny, when you look at MLS, under Walker Zimmerman's name, they put out season highlights for every single player that made Team of the Season. And the only highlight they had listed for Walker Zimmerman was, and I quote, Zimmerman is the only defender to do so after leading a Nashville backline that conceded the 4th fewest goals, 41 in 2022. That was Walker Zimmerman's standout performance, that he was a part of a backline that conceded the 4th fewest goals. Nothing else stands out. But yeah, you have a player like Alexander Collins who had a higher tackle success rate than Walker Zimmerman at 62.8, more blocks with 22, and more clean sheets with 12. And then you have Jack Elliott, who had a higher tackle success rate than both players at 66.1, more blocks, 29, more interceptions, 46, more clean sheets, 14. And a whole bunch of Union fans said, how do you not add Jack Elliott in this Team of the Season? Jack Elliott wasn't nominated for Defender of the Season. We know Kai Wagner and Jacob Glesnes were the only 2 that were nominated for the Union because MLS only allows 2 players per team, per position, to be nominated for Defender of the Year, for midfielder, and all that jazz. And Jacob Glesnes goes and takes the honors from Kai Wagner. Now, Kyle, what are your thoughts when you see Walker Zimmerman gets in Team of the Season over Collins and a Jack Elliott?
So I see Ricky has requested. I'm going to let him talk because him and I were talking earlier. But here's my thing. I was fine with the overall team except for two positions. The first one being the biggest snub was Elliott, and I was like, that does not make sense. Now, Grant, Walker Zimmerman is a fine player. He's maybe top 5, barely, but like you said, there's so many, and I was looking at stats too. My whole thing is I don't know, even like that list they brought out today, the MLS brought out, with like, what was it, like the Cup Best 11, like, it doesn't make sense to me that Cellini's better. He was in a half a season, and like he's better than Jack Elliott. Like, no, I don't know. I don't know what MLS, like, they gave him midseason defender of the year and then they leave him off team of the year. And to me, that, I don't know what happened. I don't know what the media loves about Glesnes, but I think Jack's our most consistent player day in and day out, and I love Glesnes. I think he's like, those are the best two center backs in the league. Like, just allow that. Like, if you're playing favoritism, that was the biggest snub for me. The other one was Vela, like you said, Brenner, and even Arango had a better season than Vela. I mean, I don't know. I'll let Ricky speak about the Elliott thing, but it just, those are the two omissions. Everything else I was perfectly fine with.
Yeah, for sure. And I can tell you right now, the reason Jack Elliott did not get into the team of the season is because they only had 4. They had 4 Union players already in the team of the season. They did not want to go to 5, and they didn't want majority of this team to be Union players, and so they weren't putting Jack Elliott in this list. But I'm surprised because on my list I said Alexander Collins needs to get over Walker Zimmerman. At first I had Zimmerman, but then I started comparing his stats to Collins, and I'm like, Collins was the better defender, and then you add in Jack Elliott, who's better than both of them. But there was already 4 Union players on this list. You're not taking out Wagner, you're not taking out Glesnes, you're not taking out Gazdag, and you're surely not taking out Andre Blake in goal. The only goalkeeper that comes close is Petrovic, the goalkeeper with New England, but he was only here for half a season, a little bit more than half a season, so I didn't think he had enough stats to back up being the goalkeeper of the season. But yeah, Jack Elliott not being in here, Ricky, I know you were pretty upset about this.
Yeah, I think this is basically the reason I woke up this afternoon, was to get on this podcast. I took a nap when I got home, and I was like, I need to be up at 8:30 specifically to complain about one thing, and I'm going back to bed. And it's pretty bad when his fiance is on Instagram liking every comment about it, like Ilsinho's sister out there. Like, it gets more and more ridiculous as it goes, because at first it's like, oh, the team can only put 2 people on. Okay, fair enough. They're going to put Kai on because he's had probably one of the best fullback seasons ever. We know a fullback's never going to win that award, but then you got to choose between Glesnes and Elliott. And I think if you look at both of them, probably neither of them really cares who's up for it. And then when it comes to team of the season, the only real crazy thing about this is that Walker is the other center back. You could sit there and convince me that Kynes could be it. You could sit there and convince me that maybe you're going to give somebody like Gabrielson at Austin in, just so you like have a player beyond, Driussi on the best 11. And I would sit there and be like, fair enough, but like, Nashville's wasn't that good, and they almost didn't even make playoffs. So if you're going to sit there and tell me, oh yeah, they have the 4th best defense, sure, but like, the Union had the best defense ever. It's not like it was like, oh yeah, the best defense of the year by like 5 goals. It was like the best defense of the year by like 20 goals, something like that. I don't know the exact number, but I'm honestly on this. And then I think it just gets even worse when they're like, oh, we're going to do a combined 11 of the 2 teams in the championship. And then you're going to sit there and convince me that the 3rd best center back on LAFC is better than the 2nd best center back in the league. just because they had to feel like, oh, we're not going to make this a bunch of Union players. And then you see it in the comments on that post. The Union is like sitting there listing all the other players that could have been in there, and like the most obvious one is Jack Elliott. And I do think there's probably a little bit of bias towards, we paid money for Glesnes, and Walker's about to go to the World Cup for your country, so a lot of people are sitting there voting for him. And let's be honest, a lot of writers probably don't watch every game, even of the best two teams in the league. It gets boring to a certain extent to watch the Union beat somebody 7-0. I'm not saying I'm bored, but like if you're a writer, you're probably like, oh, what? I get to write about another 7-0, stomping. And then at that point, if you're winning 7-0, 6-0, 6-0, stuff like that, we're not talking about the center backs then, right? We're talking about the attack. We're talking about other things. And you can sit there and be like, oh, maybe only 2 of the defenders are that incredible. But the bigger deal here is that Walker might have been great last year. He can't hit a penalty to save his life. And he's not even like top 3 center backs in the league. So how you get voted into that, and I think a lot of it has to do with, and you heard a lot of writers complain about this, is they were forced to pick a certain formation, and then you're going to end up with a bunch of attacking midfielders because nobody's going to vote for a defensive midfielder. And then, Kai has to be there, and that means there's only 2 spots left. And then you're going to have a bunch of people voting for random right backs, and you're going to have a bunch of people voting for random center backs. And if Glesnes is going to win Defender of the Year, then a lot of people voted for him, and that means there's only one spot really on most positions in the defense, which means a lot of people are voting for Jack Elliott, a lot of people are voting for Collins, and at that point, you end up in a thing where it's just like, there's probably like percentages out there somewhere, maybe it's been put out, and you could probably look at it and be like, so-and-so got 10%, and the next person had 10.2%, and the next 10.3%, and that's how they ended up as the third center back, or the third defensive player. Maybe that's where in the position. And then I do agree that Carlos Vela also shouldn't be on this team, but I don't know or care enough to have a fight about that.
Man, I definitely want to talk about that Carlos Vela, because, like you said, writers were forced to. Number one, we were forced to have only 3 center backs, and then 4 midfielders, and then 3 forwards. But my whole issue is, how are you going to have Driussi in the midfield when you talk to Austin fans and they consider Driussi a forward? Or I've seen some people say that he's a second 10, but when you look at the team sheets, he's always listed as a striker. And so Driussi having to go in the midfield throws off Elie Sanchez getting into this team in the season. Like you said, nobody's going to pick a defensive midfielder. And if you were, it's going to come down to Sanchez and Jose Martinez, the 2 best defensive midfielders in MLS. But Vela over the likes of Brenner, over the likes of Diego Rubio or Julian Carranza? On MLS's website, they had Vela produced 12 goals, 11 assists in 2022, which was his 3rd season with at least double-digit goals and assists. Additionally, his 11 assists, and 68 key passes were both team highs for LAFC. But you go ahead and look. Brenner had 18 goals, 6 assists with Cincinnati. Diego Rubio had 17 goals and 6 assists with a terrible Colorado Rapids team. And then Julian Carranza had 14 goals and 9 assists. You're not going to vote another Union player, but how doesn't Brenner get into this team? Brenner had a better season than Carlos Vela. And not to go on a rant, because I know all you guys hate talking about extra time and everything, and I don't know if you guys listened today when they were doing their media interviews, but Charlie Davies said that the front 3 of LAFC was better than the Unions. And I don't see how that's right at all. And we can get into that debate here later if you guys want, who has the better front 3. I said on Blake's podcast, if you guys aren't familiar with that, MLS Gone Wild, I was on his podcast yesterday. The episode was released today, and I'll leave a link in the show description for you guys. But I said the Union already played the best front 3 in MLS, and that was FC Cincinnati. And yeah, some Union fans might get upset with me saying that Cincinnati's front three is better than the Union's. I think it's super duper close, but the Union FC Cincinnati, nobody else comes close to them. Their front threes. They're by far the best front threes in MLS, those two teams. And so to come out here and say that LAFC's front three is better than the Union's, that's a little bit crazy to me.
I think inherently there's two things that I want to bring up at this point. When you're talking about like, oh, certain players can't make a best XI because of, this or that. I think at some point we're going to have multiple team of the years, whether it's West and East or a first team and second team. I think that's one of the things that Extra Time has really introduced, where they're going like 5 deep, because at a certain point there's almost like 150 starting caliber players in the league. And we're going to sit here and say that only 11 of them had a really great season. And then every year we sit here and have this conversation where it's just like, well, is it center back number 3 or center back number 4? And I think you look at like the NBA, and there's 3 teams, and then there's an all defensive team. And like there's less positions on an NBA all-star team, obviously. But at the same time, we can sit here and we can have this fight about, oh, who's the second center back, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. No, but it kind of does, because, Jack Elliott's getting nothing here. He might get a bonus for playoff games and a bonus for like playing in a cup final, but like Glesnes is going to get all the like traction from this. Kai is going to get all the traction from this. And I think when it goes to looking at the front threes, I think the bigger problem with that graphic that MLS put out is they went, oh, there's a front 3, and inherently you're not going to put any of the Union players on a front 3 that is a wide 3. Like, that just isn't how they operate. So we're going to sit here and have a conversation about a front 3 when I don't necessarily think that LA's is better. I think there's more there's more of a pedigree in their front 3, you'd say. Like Carlos Vela has been the guy for a bunch of years, even before he came back. Like if you look at old like ultimate teams, like he was a good player to have with like a La Liga team, right? You look at Bouanga coming in, like he might not be there yet, but he could be the guy next year. He could be the guy. And that's just kind of like, maybe are we saying that the possibilities there that he's the person? And then Arango, I think, is just an interesting case study, because the whole season his coach wanted to get rid of him and wanted to find a better center forward. And then they went out and bought 2 wide midfielders because they wanted to we don't want to just win the Shield, we want to win the Cup. And it's just like they bought Bouanga, and they bought that other guy, and then they brought in Bale for free and all this stuff. And I think like inherently they probably do have a more impressive front 3, but I think together the front 3 for the Union is probably a better, scoring team, a better, group of players that play together, because, inherently that's what they did. And maybe next year when Bouanga's had a full year, Vela's still around, Arango's still around, they can like get to a point where like we're talking about a top 3 front 3s. And I don't know how long Cincinnati's going to keep that up, because they need to figure some things out. If they're going to be a competitive team, they're going to need to make some defensive choices, and that might mean that you sell one of those guys. And I don't think Vasquez is going to want to sit around forever. If he wants to play for the U.S. or he wants to play for Mexico, I'm not sure Cincinnati's getting him there at this point. And I think that's something you have to think about when you look at stuff like that. For this season, I don't think you can really compare the 2 front 3s, because they're a completely different set of, on the field play and, 3 players. I'm not going to sit here and be like, the 2 forwards and the 2 wingers are comparative, and the playmaking winger is comparative to Gazdag. It's kind of hard.
For sure, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about the team of the season list. So I'll go to Kyle. You had your hand raised there like 5 minutes ago, so I'm sure there was potentially a point you wanted to bring up. And then Michael, I know you requested to speak, so I'll go to Kyle, then you, Michael, for your thoughts on team of the season.
Let Michael go because I think Ricky hit on one point there, and I'll just let Michael go.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Todd. Yeah, my point on the team of the season is kind of going to what Ricky's saying. As much as you can make arguments with the offense, I think the defense, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's just 100% spot on. I think they really did get that right. I think if you look at our team and the record that we broke, there is a reason that we should have had 3 players there. You can even make an argument, and I may be biased here, but I think Jack Elliott's the most underrated player in the league, and he had a good chance to be there as well. But looking at that, I would rather have 3 players on the defensive side and have the defender of the year than on the offensive side. Maybe it's the old cliche of defense wins championships, but I really think they're the anchor that have gotten us to this point so far.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. I mean, 26 goals conceded, the fewest in MLS this season, the fewest in MLS once MLS switched to a 34-game schedule. So, yeah, I mean, the Union's defense has definitely been the best historic this season, and could have been a little bit better. Still a little bit bitter that the Union gave up 4 goals down in Charlotte, but that doesn't matter because the Union are still in MLS Cup. That game, I guess maybe it mattered a little bit, right? Because if the Union would have got a draw, then they would have been hosting this thing at Subaru Park. And I know a couple of you guys are here that said you'd want to speak about traveling to LA and everything. And all you guys that are here that are maybe you are watching the Phillies game, but you're here listening to the podcast. You guys are talking. I appreciate you guys for being here. And the Eagles, I believe, play too tonight, right? It's Thursday Night Football. So for you guys that are showing up for the Union, I think that's a pretty big deal. Kyle, I know you were going to LA. I know Evan, you're going to LA. But Kyle, we have so much to talk about this LA game. We talked, I don't know, 2 months ago, maybe a month ago, about you and your wife Jillian traveling to all these Union games, and here we are, MLS Cup. I mean, I don't think any of us could imagine the Union would be an MLS Cup, and if they were, we were all, I feel like, assuming that it would be at Subaru Park. We were all hoping that LAFC would lose, but LAFC take care of business against the LA Galaxy and Austin FC, and they host this thing. So, I mean, your thoughts, man. You got to be stoked going out to LA.
I am. And I'm stoked mainly because my wife's never been to LA. I've been there for swimming, but I've never actually enjoyed the town. And I think for me personally, this, like, we were sitting there after we won the Eastern Conference, and I just sat there and I'm like, let's go. It doesn't matter. Like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I just wanted to go. And I know Jillian's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, let's go. And everybody's like, she's trying. She's like, my service is bad. My service is bad. Okay, I'm in. You want to go? Let's go. And literally, we booked it there while they were trying to set up the stage. And it was amazing. And I am stoked. And honestly, like, just to run down my, like, just this whole season going into the playoffs, like, Charlotte, Jillian will say this, but, like, the Cincinnati game, I was super nervous. And then at the New York game, I'm like, it's a revenge game, but I'm just waiting, like, please. And then we went off. And at this game, I'm like, let's go, because I'm just super excited. I've seen what this team has done. I've seen where they've I mean, we've been to the away games where they've gone off in DC. We've seen them score in New York. We've seen them score in Red Bull. I'm just really excited because I saw them against some of the best teams on the road, and we've won. And I still believe like it was Cincinnati and Philadelphia. Those two teams, those two teams were going to win the cup, and I still stick by them. I'm super excited, but at the same time, it's LA at home, and LA is catching fire right now, so we'll see.
Hi, Jillian. I know you wanted to talk. You're obviously going out with Kyle, and I know, Evan, you're in here. You booked a last-minute flight to LA, and if you want to speak, I'll give you the option.
Yeah, to piggyback off what Kyle said, I'm super, super excited as well. And it's interesting because, I really started following them, 3 years ago. And I've been diehard, like all the other Philly sports, and everything. And, I've been to the Phillies, and Eagles parades and all that. And it's like, that's something else. But this team, I feel like more invested in even than the other teams at this point. And even though I'm totally in on them too, but I don't know, this is something special. They really connect with the fans and everything. And they make the experience really great. And, I turned to Kyle and we're in the river end there and I'm like, we're going, aren't we? We're going. And we did it. And, it's going to be quite the trip. Like you said, I've only been to LAX basically. I haven't been really in LA and, and it was at 3 a.m. on the way back from Hawaii. So I'm just excited for the whole experience. And honestly, the way I feel about going into this game is kind of how I felt when the Eagles were playing the Patriots in the Super Bowl back in the 2017 season. We're up against, Tom Brady, and the Patriots and all them. And the Patriots were the sexy pick for, to win that. And, we're the underdogs. So I kind of feel the same way. And we know how Philly feels about underdogs. I really think we've got a good shot at this. I just feel it in my gut, we've got something special here.
Yeah, we definitely do. And I said this yesterday on the MLS Gone Wild podcast where I did pick LAFC to win this game 2-1, spoiler alert. And then it is funny too, because Kyle brought up a point where he said out of Philadelphia Union or FC Cincinnati, whichever one of those two teams won, they would win MLS Cup. And I did also say that point when I had Tom Glarder on the podcast when these two teams, FC Cincinnati and Philadelphia Union, were meeting each other in the playoffs. And the last thing I said on Blake's podcast was the Union weren't the underdogs against FC Cincinnati. They weren't the underdogs against New York City. Everybody was picking them as the favorites. And to their credit, they didn't let those expectations get to them. They took care of business. Yes, they went down behind New York City, but we haven't seen the Union come from behind much this season. And that's exactly what they did against New York City. Ale Bedoya said it today at Media Day in LA. He said, being down 1-0 against New York City, if this was a couple years ago, we would have just packed it in and that would have been it. We wouldn't have found our way back. But with new players, with this team, they have proven that they know how to come from behind. And we saw with LA in this season, the Union had the lead. They blew it. They had the lead. They blew it. So the Union do know how to score when they're down, or they know how to get the lead back when they're down. And we'll go ahead and see what the Union do in LA. But the one thing I hope the Union do is just continue to thrive in that underdog role. I hope the people that are in LA, the media members, the fans, I hope they all just keep talking about how big of a favorite LAFC is, that it gets to these players, that LAFC just go into Bank of California Stadium on Saturday and say, yeah, we're going to destroy the Union 3-4-0 and just get a hold of themselves. I don't think Shrangalo is going to let that happen with this team, but you never know, right? I mean, when somebody's hyping you up and everything, telling you how good you are and everything, it feels good and you start to believe it. And maybe it catches some of these LAFC players off guard, while the Union, hey, keep doubting us. Keep saying we're going to lose. And I don't know. Could the Union come out here within the first 10 minutes and score a goal? It's possible. We saw it earlier this season in LA. The Union get an early goal with Daniel Gazdag. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Union do in LA against the LAFC, the best team in MLS, as some have put it. But nonetheless, I mean, it's going to be a great game. Michael, Kyle, I know you came back in here, Jillian. Before we talk about how the Union got here from 2019 to current, just anything else on traveling, your expectations for traveling out to LA. Evan, I know you're in here and you're traveling out there. So if you want to come in here and talk about traveling to LA, we can go ahead and revisit that topic if you want to. If not, it's no big deal. But like I said, anything anybody else wants to bring up about traveling to LA? Well, maybe not, because we saw that Subaru Park is now officially open for the fans that unfortunately cannot go to LA. So the Union are going to have 4 watch parties, and hopefully majority of the fans go to Subaru Park, because it would be pretty wild to see the Union not playing in the stadium, but they sell out Subaru Park for a watch party. That would be fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to that Saturday. Unfortunately, not flying out to LA like some of you guys that are traveling out there. Safe travels. Maybe by the time you guys are listening to this podcast, some of you guys are already out there in LA. So let's go ahead and talk about how the Union got here. And you got to go all the way back to the 2019 season. And the Union in 2019, Ernst Tanner's first official year, the Union went 16-11-7, which was the most wins at home, the most wins in the regular season in 2019 with 16. The Union finished third in the Eastern Conference that season. They had 55 points, which was, at the time, the most in a single season. The Union get their first playoff win, 4-3 victory against New York Red Bulls. 58 goals, which was also the most at the time. And I can remember in 2019, after the season, all of us are talking about how, this is great. This is all career years for the Union. Nobody expected the Union to come out and be that successful in 2019 with a new sporting director. And you go ahead and look, the Union bring in 7 new players in Kai Wagner, Sergio Santos, Marco Fabian, Jamiro Montero, Aurelian Collin, Carlos Miguel, who's the goalkeeper now with New York Red Bulls, we all know, and Andrew Wooten. And then the Union had 7 roster spots of strikers at one point in the season with Fafa Picault, David Akam, Michi Galina, Andrew Wooten, Sergio Santos, Corey Burke, and Kasper Shabelko. And they only had 2 DPs on the roster, and Ali Bedoya and Marco Fabian. And so we're like, okay, this is the best for the Union. They get a win against New York Red Bulls, go to Atlanta, lose that game, unfortunately. But we're like, we're feeling good. Okay, we did not expect the Union to get into a win in the playoffs. And so then 2020 happens. We all know COVID happens. And I don't think any of us at the time were expecting the Union to win the Supporters' Shield, let alone win a trophy in general. But they go 14-4-5, first in the East, and they go undefeated at home. Like I said, won the first trophy, Supporters' Shield. They lose to New England in the first round of the playoffs. And the big talk was, there was 16 days from the regular season to that first playoff match against New England. And the good thing for the Union, they don't have to wait that long for the final against LAFC. Only had to wait 7 days. And so LAFC, the Union, no excuse for having a long layoff. And I know when we played Cincinnati, there was some concern from fans like, okay, well, we saw what happened against New England, 16 days off. I know the Union didn't have 16 days off from the Toronto game to Cincinnati, but it was still a little bit of a layover. And the Union do a good job not letting that affect them. They win that game 1-0, and I know some people in the media were like, oh, man, it's FC Cincinnati. The Union should have won by a lot more. But we were talking about how, okay, the Union went from behind against New York City, but I think only winning that game 1-0 against FC Cincinnati, where, let's face it, you guys were talking about it earlier, where majority of this season, the Union winning by 4, 5, 6, and at 1.7 goals in a game. And so we're just used to the Union blowing teams out. And so to see the Union have to work hard to get a 1-0 victory over Cincinnati and then to come from behind against New York City, they've proven that they can do anything that teams throw against them. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens in LA. And then you see Casper Schebelko, Sergio Santos, the leading goal scorer in 2020 with 8 goals, 5 different strikers on the roster with Rutin, Sergio Santos, Corey Burke, Schebelko, and Michi Galina. And then they break their transfer record at the beginning of the season to make Jameer Montero's loan permanent at $1.9 million. They sell their 2-star players at the end of the season in Mark McKenzie and Brendan Aronson. And then we saw new acquisitions of Jacob Glesnes, Jose Martinez, Matai Horvaths, Joe Bendick, and Leon Flock, 5 brand new players. And then we see what they do last year in 2021. They, at the end of the season, trade Jameer Montero to San Jose. They trade Casper Schebelko to Chicago Fire for $1 million in GAM, bring in 5 new players in Stuart Finley, Jesus Bueno, Daniel Gazdag, Matthias Davo, and Alvis Powell. And I know Davo is a name you guys don't like talking about a lot because we barely saw him play. And then you fast forward to what happened in 2022. This is the season where I want to get you guys' thoughts that on here on Twitter. If the Union don't wind up winning MLS Cup, would you still consider 2022 a success? We see 5 different strikers on their roster this season, and Sergio Santos, Corey Burke, Julian Carranza, Mikael Uhre, and Chris Donovan. Only 2 DPs on the roster, and Mikael Uhre, Julian Carranza. Last year in 2021, like we said, $1.9 million for Jameer Montero, and they go out and spend $2.8 million for Mikael Uhre. Midway through the season, they trade Sergio Santos to Cincinnati, which did not sit well with the locker room of the Union, but they didn't let that affect how this team played the rest of the season. And so, like I said, if the Union didn't win MLS Cup, would you guys still consider this a successful season? Kyle, Michael, Jillian?
Yes. If we don't win, will it be a disappointment? Of course. I mean, this is the best team on record. But, I mean, personally, I have making the MLS Cup against Nashville, and I think you and I both had that. But, having said that, at this point, yeah, I think it's a success. I mean, obviously, I think the ultimate prize is the MLS Cup, but I'd like to hear what Michael and Jillian have to say about this. But I really am. I would be heartbroken because of all the historic records we've broken. Now, I will say this: this team and its connections to the fans is why I really want us to win this cup, because I think this team, more than since I've been following the team, has connected so well to the fans. And anytime you see that connection, it's just so special. And so I really want us to win the cup, not just to win a cup, but I want it to win because I know the city wants it, but I also know these players want it. And it's so rare in sports, people, that both the city and the fans and the players want to win this cup. So for me, I just think it's so special. I mean, this team.
Yeah, Kyle. I think you're 100% right with that. It can't be a disappointment. But that being said, I truly believe, knowing that Wagner's going to be gone, that Glesnes, especially after winning Defensive Player of the Year, will be getting offers. Gazdag will be getting offers. McGlynn, already, like, there's PSV rumors. I think this is our best chance, and could be our best chance for a while. So I can't call it a disappointment because of what they have done and how they built up this team, having the second lowest payroll and the connection they created with the fans, and everything they've done to continue this kind of golden age. But at the same time, it would worry me that if we don't win, that this could have been the apex of our run so far.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll go to you, Evan. Is this a disappointment if the Union don't win MLS Cup this Saturday in LA?
Back on the season successful point, because that's something I've been talking about with a lot of people recently. Because I know a lot of people have said, like, based on how last year ended, obviously with the disappointment and all that, like, it needed to be MLS Cup this year. And just knowing how hard it is to get all the way there back in this league with 26, 27 teams, whatever it is, I think I defined it right when the season started by saying we needed to get into Champions League again, because that meant we either won one of the major trophies or we finished first and knocked the Shield. And I mean, I think it became pretty clear by like August that was going to happen. Obviously, like, missing the Shield on the tiebreaker is disappointing, but like, getting into the playoffs, getting the bye, kind of cementing ourselves as probably the most consistent team in the East, probably I want to say the best team in the East at the same time, while kind of consistently improving the roster. Even if, like, we had lost last week, and obviously it would have been a huge disappointment, I think the season, it's really hard to not call it a success. Obviously now, I think MLS Cup, I don't think anyone's going to argue it. And the other thing is, like, I forget who put this out the other day, but there was kind of the last 5 years of this team, and it was from making the playoffs one year to winning the first playoff game the next year to the conference final last year to the final. Like, it's so rare that you see a team just take these gradual steps in the right direction every single year. And it's something that I don't think has been really done in this league, at least since the very early days.
It's definitely not been done, because you see in 2019, like I mentioned, the Union win their first playoff game. 2020, they win their first trophy in team history. 2021, all right, they win 2 playoff games. Unfortunately, Kirby gets them in the Eastern Conference Final, and unfortunately, New York City wins that game. But the Union, like you guys have been calling it, revenge against New York City last week. The Union win that game 3-1, and now you see those small steps every single year. And so what if the Union don't win this season, right? If we take a look at what's happened the last couple of seasons, when they get closer and closer and closer to that goal of winning MLS Cup or reaching MLS Cup. All right, so let's say they don't win, but they get MLS Cup next season. Do they win it? I don't know. It is crazy to look at the Union, how they've been doing just each and every single year under Ernst Tanner. Jordan, is it a disappointment if the Union do not win MLS Cup?
Hey, Todd. I would say no, it's not a disappointment. I think if we were facing any other team other than LA and we were hosting it and we lost again, I feel like then it would be a disappointment. Thinking back to those Open Cup games where we hosted and ended up not being able to take those away, I felt like those were disappointments. But as everyone's been saying, we've been building up to this moment since those Open Cup games, step by step by step to get to MLS Cup final, that while it would feel like probably disappointment as soon as the final whistle blows if we lose, I think it's, like I said, if there's anybody else but LA, because they finished above us in the table barely, and we have to travel out there, I feel like for me that wouldn't make it a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you guys. Just because, how many times are we on Twitter, right? And talking about, the Union just broke this record. The Union broke this record. Silverberry Renee, for you guys don't know who he is on Twitter, he started a thread a while ago, just keeping track of every single record that the Union have broke. And it is crazy looking at just each and every single of these records that the Union have broke. And it's hard to keep track of all these records because they've been so successful in the regular season. And you get the argument from fans saying, the regular season isn't balanced, or how can you take anything away from the regular season when it's MLS playoffs that matter, winning MLS Cup. It doesn't really matter what you do in the regular season as long as you get into the playoffs. So, you have all these different arguments for what makes a good season, what doesn't make a good season, how important is the regular season, how important is it not. And I know another topic I didn't talk about last week on the podcast was the potential new playoff format for MLS, and that will definitely be a podcast for another day. It's probably going to be the only topic that I talk about because I definitely do have a lot of thoughts if the league decides to go away from the current format that we have. But anybody else want to get in here? Is it a disappointment for the Union if they don't win MLS Cup? If not, we'll circle back if you guys want to talk about this. But we were just talking about what stands out about the 2022 season. And I went back and looked at just some of my predictions, and I'll talk about more of my predictions in another episode. But at the beginning of the season, I said the Union would have 17 wins, 10 losses, 7 draws, which would be good for 58 points. And they get 67 points this season, 19 wins. I did expect the Union to go undefeated, which is crazy. I didn't expect them to have as many draws this season at home as they did. I said they'd have 15 wins at home, which looking back on it, I feel like that's just way too many wins that I projected at home. But I did have the Union going undefeated, which I'll pat myself on the back. I said the Union would only have 2 wins on the road, which they had the most wins on the road in their franchise history this season with 7. I projected them to only have 2. And I wanted the Union to finish in the top 3 Eastern Conference spot. I don't know why I didn't project how many games the Union are going to win in the playoffs. Do they need to get to MLS Cup? I don't know why I didn't do that, but the only prediction I gave was the Union need to finish in the top 3 Eastern Conference spot. And yeah, obviously they do that by finishing first in the East. They win the Eastern Conference trophy. That's why they're here. And you go ahead and look. A couple things that stand out for me on the season is the last 10 games of the regular season, the Union finished with 22 points out of a possible 30. I mean, the Union were lights out pretty much the last half end of the season. They had 5 separate 5-game winning streaks, and then the front 3 of Ua, Carranza, and Gazdag, 49 goals amongst those 3. I don't think anybody could have predicted that they would have that kind of impact this season for the Union. But Kyle, Jillian, Jordan, Michael, anybody else that's listening live on Twitter, what stands out to you guys about this season? And then we'll wrap up the show about our predictions for this final.
So for me, I didn't see Mikel Ua make this impact. I don't think any of us did, but he's been the X factor. And I think for me also, I was a little down. I will admit it. I was wrong. I thought Daniel would have 10 goals, 10 assists, maybe. I think he'd be a 20, 10 goals, 10 assists guy. But no, I didn't see him going 22 goals. And Carranza, as good as I thought he'd be defensively, I did not see his goal scoring effort. And he is been a breath of fresh air for that attack. And I didn't know what Andre Blake would do as a kind of, encore from last year, where you can make the argument he was better than Matt Turner. He was probably now in top 4 all-time performances, maybe top 3 in MLS history. I mean, he has now cemented himself as one of the best goalkeepers all time in MLS. And I will debate that with anybody on MLS Twitter, because you just look at the stats. I mean, what he's done is remarkable, and he needs to be in a top 5 league. I mean, he is one of the best goalkeepers the MLS has ever produced. So take that for what you're worth. That said, I think we overproduced. I had him at 58 points, and to see this season, it's been remarkable. And I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks.
Hi, Jordan. Your thoughts on the 2022 season for the Union?
Yeah, for me, I think Gazdag going off like he did was definitely way more than I thought he would do. I mean, I thought he would do well, but that surpassed. And the way the top 3 really clicked, Ua and Carranza and Gazdag, just that really was awesome to watch. And another thing that really stood out to me was Bizo, because we remember what happened last year in the Eastern Conference Final, and he gave up that goal basically. And man, did he look good last Saturday or Sunday. You could tell he really, really wanted to do better, and his play looked great this year.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me is I felt like we started off the season like super hot. And like before the season, I had actually predicted on Logan and mine's show that we would win MLS Cup. So I was feeling pretty good. And then we kind of hit this stretch in like April to like May where we had like a loss and like 5 straight draws. And I was kind of feeling a little bummed out. But then we, like you said, kind of like the last half of the season from like July 8th onward, we were just starting to tear it up again and everything was clicking. But yeah, I have a question for you, Todd, as well, because this team has been so fantastic. Who makes it into the Ring of Honor of this team? Does it affect who gets in if we win this cup or not? Because like I have Bedoya and Blake locks, but do you think that number changes if we lift the trophy here?
Oh man, that's a great question. So yeah, I actually do. I have the next player, so I think it's going to go Bedoya, Blake, and then Jack Elliott. I think Jack Elliott's going to get in the Ring of Honor. We were all starting out the show talking about how it's a shame Jack Elliott didn't get in the Team of the Season, didn't get any single MLS award this season, and the Union stopped having draft picks in MLS once Ernst Tanner took over as sporting director. He's a 4th-round draft pick from West Virginia. You know how rare that is for somebody that late in the MLS draft to still be in MLS, to make a roster? And to see him still with his team as one of the best center backs in MLS, for sure it's going to be Jack Elliott. You can make an argument for Kai Wagner as well. It's been the best left back in MLS in the last couple seasons. It's a great question you asked, and Jordan. And if anybody else wants to give the thoughts on who they think will get in the Ring of Honor next for the Union, that's not Bedoya or Blake, or maybe that's the last 2 players on this current roster, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'll go to you, Michael. Just what stands out to you on the 2022 regular season for the Union, and who's the next person to get in the Ring of Honor?
Yeah, so I'll start off with what stands out to me is I mean, everybody's hit the key points, like Gazdag proving Matt Doyle wrong like 20 times over, and really should have been MVP finalist. Is I think the standpoint of a really good offense. It was really. It's as much as I brought up earlier how nervous I am about certain people leaving. The fact that Carranza we got for a song is incredible, and I think he'll be back next year, and he has looked great and has been a great product. I think having certain players, like I think I just want to give a shout out to like Corey Burke, because I at times haven't been his biggest fan. I think coming off the bench and providing the way he has, I think that's the perfect area for him. He's really appreciated his value there. I think that's a spot that if that continues, it's really going to help us achieve success next year. And I think the thing about the main thing about this team is just it was such a great defensive effort, and you always thought, except for maybe 2 matches in Charlotte and Cincinnati, to just 2 matches throughout the whole season, which is incredible to think that any other match you thought they were 100% in it until the end, and most of the times they ended up winning or drawing it. They just had that great defense, that do or die attitude, and I think that is, if anything, going to really help them Saturday. And just to go to the point of the Ring of Honor, I talked with Harry and some other guys. Blake and Bedoya are shoo-ins. I think it's interesting. I do think Elliott, that's a really good nod. I would say if a year or 2 more, if he stays, I think you have to give it to Glesnes. It'd be very weird to have a Ring of Honor with a guy that will have over 100 caps and has won Defensive Player of the Year for us. I think that would be something very interesting. And the other guys, it's really like a Gazdag and Wagner. If they want to stay, they would definitely get in. Especially with Wagner, it's pretty obvious. I don't think they're going to be here long enough to stay. But I think sneakily, Jacob Glesnes, if he does stay, and I think there's a more higher chance that he does, not 100% chance, but if a higher chance than the other guys, I think he has a chance to make the Ring of Honor.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of great candidates on this Union roster to get into the Ring of Honor after Bedoya and Blake. But let's go ahead and end this episode with talking about the matchup Saturday. The whole reason why we're here. We got to preview the Union season, how they got here, what stood out to us. We talked about team of the season. But we're all here for one reason only, and that is the meeting against LAFC in the MLS Cup final. The first time since 2003 that both number one seeds from the East and the West are going to meet in the final. And the East have won the last two MLS Cup, with New York City winning in Portland last season, and then we had Columbus Crew defeating Seattle Sounders 3-0 in 2020 in the COVID season. But let's go ahead and talk about the previous two meetings from these two teams before we wrap up the show. And I told you guys that game ended 2-2 the last time we saw these two teams meet. And the Union, they scored first in that match with Daniel Gazdag. They blew the lead twice in that game. They were outshot by LAFC by 22-9. Andre Blake came out with 4 saves in that match, makes a good save on Cifuentes. Julian Carranza doesn't track Escobar running for the rebound. LAFC get the goal, make it 2-2. And we go ahead and see that the Union, they only gave up 3 set-piece goals all season long. And it came first time this season with Julian Carranza not tracking Escobar. Cifuentes gets a header from a corner, I believe it was. Gazdag, the way that the Union scored, he makes a back purse run onto a Kai Wagner cross. Ilie Sanchez stopped tracking the run of Gazdag. I told you guys at the beginning, I think that Ilie was the best defensive midfielder in MLS this season. It's crazy how he didn't get into team of the season. The Union, they conceded 12 corners in this game, 25 throw-ins, and Jim Curtin said after the match that it was just way too many set plays given up by the Union. And so I hope that the Union don't give that many corners up to LAFC, because they're going to make you pay if you give them long throw-in opportunities, if you give them corner kick opportunities, if you give them free kick opportunities. They will make you pay. You go back to when we played in LA in 2020, the last game before COVID shut down everything. You guys know in my intro, it's the Jacob Glesnes goal, the introduction that we got from Jacob Glesnes scoring that banger of a goal all the way out in LA. That game ends 3-3. The Union blew a lead 3 times on that game. So the 2 times that the Union have last played LAFC, they've blown a total of 5 leads. And for the LAFC fans that are listening to this podcast, that's got to make you guys feel pretty good that the Union just seemed not to be able to keep a lead against LAFC. And in that game in 2020, the Union were also outshot 21-9. Andre Blake came out with 8 huge saves, and LAFC could have won that game 4-3. Brian Rodriguez was 1-on-1 against Andre Blake. Andre comes up, denies him, and that game ends 3-3. But for me, keys to this game, the Union have to find space. And that's what Daniel Gazdag thrives in, is just that half space. He's so good in making that turn, those 1-2 passes. And Daniel Gazdag, like he did the last time they played against LA, he found space away from Ilie Sanchez. That's going to be key in this match for the Union if they want to have success against LAFC on Saturday. Number 2, the Union have to stay compact. Don't lose your shape. The Union are going to come under a lot of pressure early on in this game. 32-52. Jim Curtin said them and the Sons of Ben are the best supporters in MLS, and that's going to be such a hostile environment for the Union. It's not like they haven't faced that kind of crowd before. Like we said, we saw it back in May when the Union went there. I would argue that the toughest crowd that the Union have ever faced was probably Club America, and you might not even say that it was Club America in Mexico, because if you guys were there for the Club America match, the second leg at home, there was more Club America fans than Union fans, and That atmosphere is an atmosphere that I'll never forget. So the Union have to stay compact. Jose Martinez has to track his runner. We saw in the game against New York City, Jose did not track Maxi Morales. Jose tries to step up, win the ball back, doesn't win the ball, and he's just walking back when New York City are counterattacking. So Jose Martinez, he's got to be on it. And I know all the talk's been about, okay, is Ale Bedoya going to start? Is he not going to start in this match? Because he was injured, he told us after the game that, after 20 minutes, he felt like he was done. His body couldn't go anymore. But then he got an adrenaline rush, and he was able to go until halftime. So it's going to be interesting to see, will Ale start 45 minutes? Will he come off the bench? Will he play a role at all in this match? He said today in his press conference interview with the media in LA, he said that he's going to do everything he can possible to make sure he plays in this game. If not, we all expect Jack McGlynn to play on the right side of the diamond like he's done anytime that Bedoya's missed out. So the Union have to keep their shape against LAFC. And point number 3 I would make is, if you concede, keep playing your game. Don't lose out. If you go down 1-0, then LAFC are going to hope that you just sulk, that you get down on yourselves, because as soon as you do that, LAFC is going to make it 2-0, 3-0. So those would be my 3 keys. Michael, Kyle, Jordan, anybody else, what are your thoughts on this match? What do you expect to happen?
Yeah, I think I'm not too worried about the crowd, honestly, and that may be me being naive. But this team from what it was a few years ago is a completely a 180. Like, it used to be very difficult for them to win on the road, and now they're just they just are. I mean, at home they're undefeated, obviously, but the road team, they're a really good road team. And I really think that for some reason in LA they show up, that they just really match the bright lights. In terms of the actual the play, I think Bedoya will be missed, but McGlynn is as good as a backup as I think you're going to get in this league for such an impact player as Bedoya as well. And I think that the most important thing is to not be stupid. Basically, not let them kind of waltz in an easy goal. I think when sometimes the rare goals that have happened this year, sometimes where there's just a kind of a miscommunication or mistake, and there's been I would say very few like really, really good goals. Maybe half of the ones that have been given, other ones are just miscommunication. That can't happen against this team. That they are a really good squad, and there's a reason they won the Supporter Shield. And I hate to say it, I really think we're going to. I hope it's called a clean game. But the conspiracy theorist in me thinks, if any team's going to get a little bit more of a push by the refs, it's going to be LAFC, as you can see. Even the MLS sponsor podcast is just in love with them versus almost any other team. So, but with all that being said, I think any team that can manage that is us.
Jordan, Kyle, whichever one of you guys want to go, your expectations for this game on Saturday.
I mean, like I said earlier, it's going to be a grind, but I've seen this team do things I didn't think they would do all year. So for me to say, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Todd, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's kind of the excitement of it. I mean, we could blow them out. They could blow us out. It could be PKs. I don't know. But I think to see two teams go head-to-head, the two best teams in the league for MLS is huge. And I think that's an underrated narrative. And I see MLS and all these people just going LAFC because of the names. And they're a great team. I'm not even going to give them any knocks. But at the same time, I mean, just to see what we did those last 20, 25 minutes again against NYCFC. I mean, we've seen that before. If that goes off, I mean, if we're going up 3-0, well, which we won't, but even if we're rolling early, which I hope we are, if we roll early, I like it. If it gets to 70, 80 minutes, now I'm getting nervous. But at the same time, again, this team has done so many great things this year. And like I was thinking on the drive home today, I'm not ready for the season to be over. It's been such an awesome season. And I'm just so happy we all got to be part of this. So no matter what, it's going to be awesome. And I'm glad you guys get to go watch at the Soup. So.
Yeah, so my thoughts on this game are that team is special. I really thought we were going to, this sounds terrible, I really thought we were about to pack it in when we went down 1-0 NYCFC at home. I was like, this is just a repeat of last year, but we have a healthy squad. And then I prayed and I said, please at least win this game. So I guess if we lose, it's my fault. But I do think we will win, and my key to the game is if you get a lead, we got to shut it down. Like you were saying, Todd, about the game earlier this year, and then the game in 2020, that anytime we took the lead, we ended up giving it right back. So I had a 2-1 Union win as my prediction.
And we will take a 2-1 Union victory. If that happens, you guys that are going to LA, you guys will set the scenes early for all of us back home at Subaru Park. Just any more predictions from you guys? What you expect to happen? Jared, I know you got in here late. I'm sure you're as hype and as nervous as anybody. Are you going out to LA or are you coming out to Soup?
All right, so I'm about to break some news. I am going to LA for this game.
Let's go. Let's go.
So
Let's go.
Some things fell into place, and I'm able to go. So I'm super excited. From what I can tell, there will be about 900 people there, if not over. Yeah, again, I'm sorry I'm late. I forgot this was happening. But yeah, I think if it's anything like the other 3 matchups that we've had, like it's going to be a hard fought battle. And this will be the first time there will ever be a winner between these two teams. So like, that's kind of a big deal. And like, if history repeats itself, we're going to see extra time, folks. I mean, I don't want any part of that. Like, I don't think that my heart can barely handle this week between the World Series, the Eagles, and now this. Like, I don't know if I can handle like an extra time game. But we're going to be bringing the energy out there. Like, I'm really excited. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. I don't know how I'm supposed to sleep.
Yeah, I don't blame you, dude. I mean, to leave it literally last minute and then say, yep, I'm going out to LA. So, I'm glad you were able to get tickets. Like you said, there's going to be a ton of Union fans out there. Union fans, they travel well. And I think that's one thing we saw throughout the season, especially down in D.C., seeing how Union fans took over Audi Stadium. And so it'll be interesting to see, okay, how big, how loud 900 Union fans are going to be in that stadium at Bank of America Stadium. Obviously, you guys are going up against 3252. Jim Curtin said that it's the 2 best supporter groups in MLS going at it. There's definitely going to be a ton of noise in that stadium, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game. And for everybody, again, that is staying back home watching this, whether at Subaru Park, whether one of the other 3 watch parties, or maybe you're going to be watching it from home. Whatever happens on Saturday, just be proud, I think, of what happened this season. Yeah, it'd suck if the Union don't win MLS Cup, but yeah, I think this is a season that Union fans can be proud of. The good thing is we'll finally get a team that's not Seattle or Toronto winning MLS Cup. So we'll get a brand new team winning MLS Cup. Hopefully the Union can get their first ever win over LAFC. LAFC are looking for their second ever win over the Union. 3 straight draws the last 3 games these two teams have met. So, yeah, I mean, extra time's a potential. Penalty kicks is a possibility. And if you go into penalty kicks, I know all you Union fans are very, very confident in Andre Blake and penalties like we saw last year against Nashville. But anything else you guys want to bring up before we give it a wrap on Twitter Spaces? And again, all you guys that join, whether you listen, whether you spoke, I know the Eagles are playing, I know the Phillies are playing, and you guys came here to listen to the podcast, to speak about the team that's number one in your heart, the Philadelphia Union. So I appreciate all you guys that have shown out tonight, and even some of you LAFC supporters that want to hear it from the other side, how fans are feeling. I appreciate you guys coming out tonight listening too. But again, anything else anybody else wants to bring up before we wrap this thing up?
I mean, biggest thing that I would say is that no matter the result, like, yes, a loss would suck, but like what we witnessed the team do this year is absolutely incredible. Like, we set so many records. We came close to setting records. Like, the way this team played and came together is unreal. Like, just the fight alone they showed in that NYC game, like that's something that we're not used to seeing in this Union team. And like, I don't know, just like seeing how like when Flock scores the game winner against Cincinnati, like he goes straight to Jim. Like, this season was special, and like, we need to not take that for granted. Like, yeah, we can take like a day or two to be sad about it, but like, this team like deserves all the love that we can give them when they come back. Like, those of us who are going out there, we're gonna make sure that they hear us. But like, I don't want anyone, like, I know there will be people, but I don't want anyone to hang their heads at the result of this season if it goes poorly, because yeah, like, this has been the greatest season in Union history, and it's a season that we should all remember. And hopefully it's a continual train upwards, but like, positive feelings, everybody. Like, we did really good, and let's keep it going and carry it over into next year, because next year we're gonna have a lot of games.
Yeah, we definitely are, with Leagues Cup, Champions League, with the league itself. Yeah, it's one thing that you guys aren't going to complain about. There's more Union games, more opportunities, and you have the U.S. Open Cup. So plenty of chances to watch the Union next season. And it all comes to an end this Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 p.m. Western Standard Time. LAFC versus the Philadelphia Union. Like I said, we're finally going to get a team that's not Toronto or Seattle winning MLS Cup, so that should be nice. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow @FreeKickPod, wherever you get your podcasts, The Free Kick. Check out the website, thefreekick.net. And yeah, just I can't wait for this game. It's going to be nerve-wracking, I think, for both teams, honestly. I think, yeah, LAFC fans know that they experienced a little bit of a downfall towards the end of the season. You bring in new players. They're getting adjusted to the country, to a new team, a new league, and then they finally start to figure things out. And this LAFC team, the last thing I'll say, is completely different from the one that the Union saw in May of this season. It's a night and day difference between that team and this team. And I'd say the same thing about the Union. And I don't think we'll get a high-scoring game. I think extra time's a real possibility, and we'll see what happens. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.